Hey guys, Vance from My Latin Life here. Before we crack into the episode with Brighton from almostretiredinmexico.com, just a warning, I'm aware the audio on my side is not that great in the episode. Brighton's audio is excellent, and we're going to put out the episode anyway, even though my audio wasn't great because, sometimes done is better than perfect. And I'm aware I screwed up not only this audio, but also the one with Richard McCall, Columbia Calling, which is another podcast that we're going to put out anyway. So I don't know why, I don't know. I screwed up twice basically. But in any case, we're putting out the episodes because these guys are legends and they're still great episodes. So without further ado, enjoy this podcast with Brighton from almostretiredinmexico.com. Welcome back to the My Latin Life podcast. Since 2014, My Latin Life has been your trusted guide to traveling and living in Latin America. My guest today is Brighton West from almostretiredinmexico.com. Brighton, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely, man. Are you in Mexico at the moment?
Sadly, I am not. I am in Portland, Oregon, because I spend half my time in Mexico and half my time up here. And currently, it's in the half my time up north.
So, Brighton, I thought maybe the best way to kick things off would be to tell us a little bit about what inspired you to start almostretiredinmexico.com.
Yeah, let me take a stab at that. My wife and I moved to Mexico somewhat unexpectedly, right at the beginning of the pandemic. We'd been spending our winters in San Diego, just a couple blocks from the beach in Ocean Beach. It was wonderful, but incredibly expensive. And so we just took a weekend trip down to La Paz, Mexico. Neither one of us had heard of La Paz before, and we got a real estate agent just for fun. And the first house he showed us, we said, "We'll take it." And the rest is history. That's been 4 years ago. And once we were living there, I do a lot of video work for my clients. That's my job.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, oh, well, I'm going to start a YouTube channel about what we're doing down here. And then it's kind of grown from there because it's a lot of fun. I think doing a YouTube channel, you know this because you're in the podcast world. You get to meet some really interesting people. It gives you an excuse to meet people you wouldn't otherwise meet.
This is true. And did I hear correctly? You bought the very first house you looked at?
Yep, exactly. In a city we'd never heard of before that weekend. But it was just so
I need
amazing.
rich friends like you.
Well, the house was $165,000 for a half-acre lot on the beach, 3-bedroom, 2.5-bath house, plus a casita with another bathroom. So yeah, I wouldn't say you have to be, or at least back then, you didn't have to be rich to buy a house in Mexico. It was kind of one of those things.
Was this?
This was 2000. So
Year 2000. Okay.
yeah, so we as I mentioned, we had been living down in just a few blocks from the beach in San Diego, and I think our rent was $3,000 a month or something like that, just to get away from the rain for a couple of months. And so we were living amongst all these houses that were million plus easily. And then we get down to Mexico and we're like, wow, it's a beautiful house. It's a palapa house. So it's got a palm tree roof.
Mm-hmm.
And we were like, wow, that's the price for this. And we're not those type of people that just kind of jump in like that. But we jumped in and we are super glad that we did.
And I guess for some context for the listeners as well, the YouTube channel is Almost Retired in Mexico, just shy at the time of this recording of 30,000 subscribers, which is really solid, really commendable, and over 300 videos. And there's a blog as well.
Yes, exactly. So that's kind of my fun project, which it's making money, but not as much money as I'd like it to make. But I also do the videos for clients. And so I built a business really, this was pre-pandemic by 5 years or so. I said, I want to build a business where I can have the clients that I want and I can do it from anywhere in the world. And luckily before the pandemic hit, my wife just happened to get a job where she could work from anywhere in the world. And that's why we were living down in San Diego during the winters. And so everything just kind of fell into place with, kind of by design and somewhat by luck.
Amazing. And I enjoy interviewing YouTubers and podcasters because usually you have an audio setup that's on point. Me, I'm traveling at the moment. I'm using the what's it called, the Apple headphone. So I don't even have my normal setup. So you're outclassing me here, but I'm happy. I'm happy that one of us has good audio. And
So
one
where are
thing
you
that
traveling to? Can I ask?
I'm all around. I'm all around, but I am largely based in Mexico.
Okay.
Um, and when I look at your channel, you guys do really well. Like each video is like 5,000 plus views,
Mhm.
etc. And it seems like you have a lot of, I don't know if you call them guests or friends or basically like other retirees, other gringo
Mhm.
retirees in Mexico, and you interview them and talk to them about what their experience has been, preconceived notions versus reality, and so forth.
Mhm. Yeah, really, I'm really shooting for the almost retired crowd. So, when I was looking at this, I was like, okay, well, what's the niche that I can fill? And there were a lot of older people on YouTube who were talking about being retired, and there were a lot of younger people, more your age, that were kind of digital nomads, things like that. But there seemed to be a missing middle. So that's where I wanted to
Hmm.
shoot for was the ideally I'm working with people or talking to people who are either retiring early because you can do that if you move to Mexico. You don't need as much money, or they're uh, kind of extending, changing how they work to be a digital nomad in later life, or slowing down, buying a local business, something where there was one woman. She had a really really poor pension, like $130 a month, and she's in her 60s. So
Damn.
now she teaches English online, and she actually took her house and split it in half, kind of built a wall down the middle, and she Airbnbs out the other half. So she was able to make it work. There's another couple that I'm working on the interview editing right now, and they live half time in La Ventana, Mexico. And they both have jobs. She's a writer, so she has like a contract writer, and he runs a couple of companies, so they're able to do it remotely. So I guess I don't have a tagline, but if I had a tagline, it would be something like "Don't wait till you're 65." Yeah, you can do this earlier.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I do, Brighton. I think that's actually part of our message as well at My Latin Life is
Mhm.
that there's something for everyone in Latin America. Obviously, if you're
Yep.
in your 20s and single, Latin America, best place to be. If
Yep.
you're raising a family, maybe you're in your early 30s or 40s, you have young kids, Latin America, also a great place to be for a number of reasons. And then for the retirees and the almost retired, I'm going to start using that more. I think there's definitely something in Latin America for the almost retired as well.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. One of the videos that I have coming out soon, I think I get a lot of ideas from the comments section of my YouTube channel. A number of people have said, "Hey, what about those of us with kids?" So there's a number of people who are in their 50s and they have kids, who are, not normally toddlers, but maybe in their teens, preteens, something like that. So I'm working on a video about families moving to Mexico and kind of what
Hmm.
issues do you find about schooling or making friends or speaking the language. I mean, kids learn the language so much easier than adults, so it's really pretty easy for them to hop in, easier than you would think. And what an amazing childhood to spend overseas.
Hell yeah. And what about you? Have you brought kids with you on the move?
I brought four legged kids. That's it. My wife and I don't have children, and we just have lots of dogs. Usually we come back with more than we went down with, but then we find homes for those up here. So that's our that's our kids. And I got to say, it probably is easier. More people move to Mexico without kids, or they move to Mexico once their kids are out of the
Empty
house.
nesters. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Empty nesters. It's like, well, what do we do now? Let's get out of here. And they have a really big house. Often in this economy, it's worth a lot of money, and they say, hey, we could move to Mexico and have, we could just
Literally
sell the house,
retire.
buy a new one, and then be retired, and we got enough money for that. Or we can buy an amazing house in Mexico. So
Hmm.
there's lots of options.
Absolutely. And have you like ventured into the real estate agent selling real estate in Mexico side of things, or you probably have a partner at least that you work with?
Yeah, actually, I'm really not super great at having like official partnerships because I do work with a number of real estate agents. Typically, when I go somewhere, I want to do a real estate video, so I hook up with someone recommended to me. Most of them I don't get any kind of commission from, but there's a few that every once in a while will give me some kind of commission because they got some big deal or something like that. So um, yeah, I usually make those videos more for content purposes, and it would be really nice to have some system built where I could be compensated when I make those connections, because I make a lot of those connections for people.
Yeah, I think you and me are both leaving some money on the table.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a struggle when you're a content creator as to like how much do you want to monetize your audience, and clearly, we can't just do this stuff just for fun. If you want to produce something uh, of substance, then you need to get paid at least something for it. So the question is, how much do you push versus, I have like a sponsor right now. It's a really easy one. It's like, oh yeah, this is sponsored by BetterHelp, something like that. No problem. But getting into the weeds of like, okay, now if you buy a house from Agent Gordon and you saw him on my channel first, make sure it starts to feel a little funny. So I like the soft touch type
Mhm.
of asks, I guess.
Okay. And just to be clear, I mean, you don't have to tell me where you live, but it sounds like you're in the Baja Peninsula now still?
Yeah, yeah. So our house is in El Centenario, which is just outside La Paz. It's actually really nice because it looks across the Bay of La Paz at the city. So we see the city lights at night. It's really nice. We built a little hot tub plunge pool right by the beach. So we've got a
Mm,
glass fence along the beach. So you sit in the hot tub, have a margarita, and just look out across the bay is really wonderful. It's
okay.
also really great for sunrises. Moonrises actually are nice. They go right over the city of La Paz, and
Hmm.
that's wonderful. We don't get the great sunsets though because we're on the wrong side of the water. But
Yeah, yeah.
I'll take the rest of it.
Yeah, I've been to La Paz. I mean, it's cool.
Mhm.
I noticed that like the beaches, maybe the beach is half decent in Centenario, but like in downtown La Paz, it's really not working. You really have to kind of go out
Mhm.
to kind of Belandre, at least somewhere out there, or get onto that peninsula thing where the whale
The
sharks are,
Mogote.
and,
Yeah.
and the dunes, Mogote.
Yep.
And that road to Mogote, man, I did that. It's pretty rough. Like you're like, but it's worth it.
Well, it got paved last year. So things are changing when they start paving the road to Mogote. So I actually didn't drive out to Mogote this winter, but I've seen the road. So it's a lot easier to get there now. Yeah, it's not paved all the way up the peninsula, but the beaches in El Centenario are a mix of kind of similar to downtown. Like you said, they're just kind of okay, crappy beaches, whatever. They're nothing like the beaches like Balandra, which are, some of the most beautiful beaches in the world. But
Hmm.
on one side of El Centenario, the other side from us, there's really nice beaches. Our beaches is just kind of okay. But you know what? We live on the beach, so we'll take it.
And I remember when I was at Mogote, we couldn't find a place to rent the sandboards, but we got out
Mhm.
there and we met like a Mexican family, and there's only so much sandboarding you can really do, and they were like kind of spending the whole day out there, so they let us borrow them,
Oh, nice.
and we got to rip some sandboarding. And I remember on the beach there was a full like whale carcass, like
Oh, wow.
bones, everything. It looked like a dinosaur.
Uh
It
huh.
was it was pretty nuts. Like it was just bones. It wasn't like flesh or anything, but it was
Nice.
like a full bone thing. I was like, holy, this is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's such a nice area out there. And you never know what you're going to find. This year there was a hurricane that came through, and I mean there's even still some yachts, probably 200-foot yachts that are kind of abandoned. So there's lots of sailboats around. So there's a little bit of not as many carcasses, but a lot of uh I don't know, boat carcasses, I guess. So
There you go.
it's Mexico, it
Is
is what
is
it
there a
is.
direct flight from La Paz to Puerto?
There's not a direct flight from La Paz anywhere in the US. So it says it's an
Really?
international airport, but no longer. It used to have flights. I mean, they have flights every once in a while. The last one was 2 years ago, probably. It stopped. It was from Phoenix or Dallas, American Airlines, I think. There's talk of getting a new flight to LAX, which would be really wonderful. That's a great airport to connect through.
Mm,
But right now, it's not. which kind of keeps the number of foreigners out. Really, La Paz is a city. It is a tourist destination, but it's a tourist destination for wealthy people from Guadalajara and Mexico City. So the that's where the flights are coming from. That's where people are coming from. If you get in a flight in La Paz, you're going to go to another spot, to a major city. You're not going to go to any other tourist destinations in Mexico. It's going to be a major city and it's going to be full
So
of
when you lay over,
wealthier.
where do you lay over?
Um, so we drive down in
Uh,
November or October, and then we drive back. But I'll go down this summer, and typically, I mean, there's a couple of options. LA is a good one, or flying up to Seattle. Seattle. Oh, actually, I guess I should mention this. Cabo is less than 3 hours away, so
right.
most people just fly into Cabo and catch a bus. You can get a bus right in the airport that goes all the way down to downtown La Paz.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's kind of the typical thing. It's easier. Trying to get into La Paz without the direct flights can be tricky. Also, on the border of San Diego is the CBX. The Tijuana airport has a door on the U.S. side, so that's another pretty convenient thing. If you can get into the Tijuana airport, you can get pretty much anywhere in Mexico just by flying into
Mm,
San Diego and then
mm-hmm.
Ubering over to the other airport.
Okay, couple of options.
Yeah,
Do you have like a RV thing or a normal car?
we did the RV thing for a couple of years. We bought an RV for this, traveling back and forth, and then we realized the roads in the Baja were way too narrow for having an RV. It was really sketchy. We did hit mirrors with a truck on one instance, smashed out the driver's side window, just glass everywhere. So my wife looked at me once when we were going around some curves, and there was a semi coming the opposite direction. And I was totally white knuckled. And she's like, "Do you feel okay right now?" And I'm like, "No, I'm freaking freaked out." So she's like, "Okay, let's sell the RV, go back to just having a car." It's pretty easy. It's a lot faster in a car. So that's what we do now. That or twice a year, we go back and forth in the car, and then the rest of the time we'll fly.
Mm. And you sleep somewhere on the way?
Yeah, so we actually have a number of Airbnbs or hotels, just kind of like we always stop in Mexicali, and we kind of have like the the areas that we stop in are usually the same spots each time. So we have two dogs that we travel with, so we usually want something with a fenced yard that they can kind of run around in. So we just kind of built up our these are the places to stay.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Now we kind of got a bit of a mental picture of what your Mexico experience looks like. I'd love to go back to just talking about how you guys really interview lots of other retirees, and
Hmm.
I'm sure you've probably talked to hundreds, if not thousands, of retirees at this point, not
Hmm.
only in the Baja Peninsula, but looking at some of your YouTube videos, you talk to people who are in Chapala, Jijic, and
Hmm.
probably I'm assuming like San Miguel and other
Yep. Yep.
retirement destinations
Puerto
in
Vallarta. Yeah.
Mexico, Vallarta, and so forth.
Yeah, so
Um,
I try to get around in the summer. I usually try to make it down to a new area. We're talking about Puebla this year, maybe that area, or Oaxaca.
mhm.
So it gives us a good excuse to spend the summers at a different part of Mexico, collect some videos, and yeah, explore the rest of Mexico. Because we chose to live in La Paz. As I said, we didn't know what we were doing, and then we learned that there was a place called Ajijic, and we learned that there was a place, Querétaro, and all these places. And I was like, wow, there are these amazing places out there. Uh, well, we bought a house, so we're sticking around in La Paz, and we love living on the beach. But it's great to explore the rest of Mexico. There's so much to offer, and I mean, you get to see all of Latin America. So there's so many options. We're just trying to work on biting away at the pieces of Mexico.
Sure, yeah, I mean, could be worse.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I mean, two ways I'm thinking about going. One is maybe you could compare some of your favorite retirement spots in Mexico and um, maybe what characteristics would appeal to what type of person.
Hmm.
So maybe let's kick it off with that. Like, it sounds like you've been to Vallarta and San Miguel and
Yeah.
maybe some of these other spots and Los Cabos, obviously, and
Hmm.
maybe Valle de Guadalupe and Sonora, and you could kind of compare. And I'm sure you have tons of people reaching out to you saying, "Where should I retire?" And you kind of say, like, "Okay, what are your goals?" And
Yeah. Yeah. So I I have most of my videos are from La Paz because that's where I live for 6 months of the year. So it's really easy to capture people there. But as I mentioned, I do get around the rest of Mexico. And as for deciding, there's actually a guy, Greg Custer, I think is his name. He has a great website about living in Mexico, or choosing Mexico, something like that. And he's been doing this for 40 years, I think. He's coming out of the world of tourism in Mexico or something. So he's got a whole bunch of ways that you can look at different things. Like, is the weather important year round? If you don't like heat, La Paz is not a good option. If you don't like humidity, Puerto Vallarta is not a good option. But some of these in like Ajijic and the whole Guadalajara area or Querétaro or San Miguel, some of these in town or in the middle of the country places are just gorgeous year round. Another thing is hospitals. How much do you care about hospitals? One of the places we stay is San Ignacio. On the drive home, it's probably 9 hour drive out of La Paz. So about
San
9 hours from the
Ignacio.
border,
Gotta
nine
look this
hours.
one up. Okay.
Yeah, San Ignacio. But the guy there at the place where we stay, he said, yeah, well, my wife had to take her mom to the hospital in La Paz. And I was like, wow, she had to drive 9 hours to get to a real hospital.
Baja's
So
remote
yeah,
when you're in
yeah,
the middle of it.
yeah, they're right in the middle. There's some, they probably don't have a clinic in that town, but you could go to Loreto, maybe an hour and a half away, and you'd get to a clinic. But to get to a real hospital for whatever her mom needed, you yeah, you'd have to go 9 hours either direction. So Tijuana's got great hospitals, La Paz has great hospitals, but in between, there's not a lot. So it's something to think about. Uh, how important that is. Even La Ventana, just 45 minutes outside of La Paz. That you got to get to La Paz if there's an emergency or something. There's nothing really right there. So that's
Mm-hmm.
something that's kind of probably more important to retirees than it is to the digital nomads.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so whether uh, also how much English is spoken is a big one. I think younger people probably have a little bit easier time learning the language. So as you're getting older, it's like, oh, I struggle with the language. Everyone does. But there's some places like Puerto Vallarta or Cabo or Cancun where, you know, they speak more English than Spanish in those places. And then the more you get off the beaten path, the more you need to speak Spanish. But that's also a great way to learn. So there's a couple of things that people should be looking at. There's lots and lots of things to consider, I guess, that can narrow down your choices.
Mm-hmm.
Hey guys, quick break from the podcast to tell you about job stacking. If you're a remote or hybrid worker looking to maximize your earning potential, then Rolf Haltza, author of Job Stacking, guarantees you'll be able to double your income by implementing his paycheck multiplication layering method. This is the exact system Rolf has used to take his own income and those of many others beyond $20K a month. With this method, Rolf contractually guarantees that you'll be able to double your income in 45 days. So, if you're interested in unleashing your earning potential and doubling your income, then click the link in the description and book a call with Rolf right now. Hey guys, quick break from the episode to tell you about BitRefill. BitRefill allows you to shop online and in person without banks, converting your crypto directly into merchant balance. We're talking gift cards to Nike, Amazon, Apple, Airbnb, Hotels.com, and many more, all paid for with crypto. BitRefill offers more than 10,000 gift card options in 180 countries all across Latin America, including Brazil, Colombia, Mexico, Argentina, El Salvador, and many more. You can also apply the code MyLatinLife at checkout to get 10% back on your first purchase. Go to bitrefill.com for more information.
And when you speak to retirees that are making the move, I'm sure the percentage of people considering this and the percentage of people that take action,
Uh,
I don't want to say funnel, but it's only a percentage that actually end up executing versus the daydreamers.
mhm.
And people, I'm sure, love watching your channel and daydreaming about these things.
Yep.
What are some of these factors that people are considering, and what are some of the true motivators that separate the action takers from the daydreamers?
That's interesting. I like your way you put that, the true motivators, but because I agree, there's a lot of people. There's probably more people that are dreaming than are doing. A lot of people, I'm in my 50s. We're at the age when our parents are starting to get ill. Uh, and that can be an issue for a lot of people that they want to stay where their parents are.
Hmm.
So actually, I made a couple of videos about bringing your parents to Mexico because there's some really great options. One of them was talking about the Ajijic areas got a lot of long-term care homes, like small
Hmm.
homes, like 12 people living there, and they cater to Americans and Canadians, and I think they charge something like $2,000 or something a month for a room there,
Wow.
and
That's like nothing for long-term care, right? Like long-term
yeah,
care can be like 10 grand a month. No,
exactly. Yeah, that's probably, pretty typical is 10 grand. So if you can do it for two or three, like go ahead, move mom and dad south. Actually, that was one of the things I did an interview with someone. They have an amazing house in Ajijic, but part of moving down was they sold their parents' house and they sold their house. They were able to buy this house, and with the money that they saved, they're able to have full-time care for their parents. And
hmm.
actually, a lot of times it's full-time care for everyone because this person's cooking and cleaning and everything.
Yep.
So they've got so much better than they could have had in the United States by moving to Mexico. And they were able to retire early. That's another thing that you just throw in on that.
Yeah, I'm not sure how familiar you are with our Twitter, if at all, but we, you can answer that if you want. No,
Yeah,
you can say no.
I'm just a little bit annoyed with Elon's how he made it so that you can't read a Twitter anything without actually having a Twitter account. And I'm
Yeah,
like,
let's just
it
sign
used,
up.
yeah, but it used to be like you could just, it's like a website, just like anything, you just see it. Anyway, I'm just a little bit. Anyway,
I think it's because the bots type of thing, and he's
yeah,
trying to get rid of the bots and the web scrapers.
yeah, maybe,
Um, but anyway, so we talk about this a lot. The
mhm,
idea that when you move to Latin America, if you don't want to, you don't have to pump your gas. You don't have to do
yeah,
your laundry. You don't have to cook. You don't have to clean your house.
yeah,
All this stuff can be outsourced for a fraction of what it would cost in the US.
yeah. Especially any kind of service like that. That's just I know I was talking with the folks who have kids, and they said, yeah, typically it's 100 pesos an hour for someone to take care of your kids just for like you just general care, cleaning the house, all that kind of stuff. And that's like $6 an hour for someone to come and take care of your kid.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, we
100
pay
pesos.
300 we pay 300 pesos a day, like
Yep,
which is like an 8-hour day, right?
yep.
And
Yeah, that's the
that's
thing she said
that's
is
minimum that's
if you
minimum
commit to more,
wage.
it's cheaper.
Yeah.
So that's just if you need an hour or two away. But
So to put that
yeah.
in perspective, we do 6 days a week. So that's 1,800 pesos for a 6-day week, which is 145 Canadian,
Mhm.
or in USD. Right now, it's 106
Yeah.
US a week for 6 days a week, 8 to 5, cooking, cleaning, watching the kids, whatever you need.
That's awesome. So you have your kids down there. I didn't know you had kids. So
I will
that's
neither confirm nor deny.
awesome. Yeah, but even if you didn't have kids, I mean, we've been talking about this. Like, we have someone who cleans our house every 2 weeks, and we've got people who do a lot of stuff around, but we don't have anyone who's kind of like there on a regular basis. And a lot of my neighbors do. They have someone who cooks for them all the time, or they have different people on a regular basis, and it seems like a
And
pretty good.
you know what's funny though is in our comments on Twitter, we get a lot of comments like, "I don't want someone in my house" type of thing. This like classic like
Yeah,
U.S. mindset. Like,
yeah,
you encounter that as well?
yeah. I haven't encountered it so much, but actually, I was just talking to one of my cousins. My mom was talking about one of my cousins doesn't want someone in his yard to cut his grass, and I'm like, oh my god, just he's getting up there. Let someone cut your grass. But I mean, he's in the U.S., but yeah, I mean, these people they kind of become your family. I'm sure you've experienced that because you start to make close connections, and and Mexican people, and probably across Latin America, it's much more family oriented, and there's
Hmm.
much more of a connection between people. Um, and it's I think it's different maybe than the US. It's not like
Hmm.
having that's like having a plumber or something
I,
that you find
I
when you're
want to
little.
hear you elaborate on this. We talk a lot about this, how Latin America is more family oriented and
Mhm.
it's more warm. Could you elaborate on that a bit more?
Yeah, well, actually, my wife and I don't have kids, and we're not really big kid people, but that weekend that we came to La Paz, we were there for 3 days, and I think we got there on a Sunday. And Sunday night, we had a hotel room downtown on the Malecon, and Sunday night is like or Sunday is family day in Mexico.
Hmm.
So all the families were out with their kids. It's like 9 o'clock at night. There's cars cruising at like 2 miles an hour up and down the Malecon. People are riding skateboards. They're on their bikes, but the entire families are out. And we both were like, this is magical. So even though we're not family people, it it just I don't know. There's something when you're around it. It's like this just feels good. Where you've got multi generational families walking together
Hmm.
every Sunday night, just walking down the Malecon, eating ice cream or going out to dinner. It's just, um, yeah, like I said, it's magical, and that's how it works in Mexico. And that's actually one of the reasons why they don't have a lot of that long term care that people are looking for because it, everyone takes care of their family. Our caretaker, so we have a caretaker that lives in our house when we're not there, and he lives in our casita. He lives when he's not living with us. He lives with his parents, so he's probably in his 30s. He lives with his parents about 3 or 4 blocks up the road that we live on, and I've never been in his house, but I've been to his house and I've seen it. And you know, he lives with his parents, which is great. But the house, I'm guessing that the casita that we have him in is nicer than the house that his parents live in. That's just kind of cinder block. I don't know if it's painted at all. I'm not sure if it even has a concrete floor. So, um, but it works really well for us because he gets a really nice place to stay. We pay him a little bit during the summer, and then he goes back and he lives with his parents. And that's if you're not married, that's how it is in Mexico. You're likely to live with your parents, and you're not likely to move
Hmm.
really far away. And I think that's changing. And I think that's part of the gentrification story. I don't know how much you touch on that, but people, well-educated Mexican people, are moving further away from home. They're moving to the places they want to go to. So things are changing a bit in Mexico.
I personally love this about Mexico, and I love the La Paz specific example. A malecon, for anyone listening that's unfamiliar, is
Mhm.
just a boardwalk, like a oceanfront, waterfront boardwalk, where people walk along, and there's kind of bike lanes, and
Mhm.
it's kind of like a wide avenue there. And La Paz is big on skateboarding. They have like the skate parks, and it really feels like maybe Southern California in that
Oh yeah,
regard.
yeah, it
I
does.
feel, where there's like surf shops and skate shops and that kind of thing.
Hmm.
But we talk about this a lot, like all over Mexico in the parks, you see three generations hanging
Hmm.
out, eating ice cream, kicking the soccer ball, doing all that type of stuff. And I feel like we really lost that in the U.S.
Oh yeah, yeah. I, I'm not sure how prevalent it's been. At least 50 or 100 years since that was common in the U.S. And it's probably more common in like the Midwest or something like that, where there were the farm families. But it's still there. I like to think of Mexico as kind of like the U.S. was probably in the 70s. It's just
Hmm.
there's people are driving around without wearing seatbelts. The kids are in the back of the truck, or they're sticking their head out the sunroof or something like that. It's it's a different flavor of life. Maybe it's not as safe to do that, but it is kind of what's accepted. There's definitely more in La Paz, I think, than on the mainland. There's more of a litter problem. And I think, if you look back into the 70s in the US, I talked to a Canadian guy I have happy hours every Sunday and with,
Oh,
followers,
cool.
subscribers. And he was like, yeah, well, we used to say that back in the 70s when we crossed from Canada into the US. We're like, holy crap, these people have their garbage is everywhere. And now we see that when we cross from the US into Mexico. But it's just, uh, it's part of that being 50 years ago. And that is just a wonderful time to be. like a lot of people I think are looking for that. Like it's like,
Hmm.
my childhood. That's what things are like. It's just a different speed of life. It's much slower. Things might not be as convenient, but it ends up being more social. And I went to the fruit stand, and I was filming my purchases at the fruit stand, and the person running the fruit stand saw me do that, and they kind of stopped someone and had them change the radio and played some music, and they started dancing and had me filming dancing, and then we were having this long conversation. We're having a great time, and there was someone behind me waiting to check out, and she was just waiting because it's not go go go. So if you're a little bit delayed, but someone's making a connection with someone else, that's perfectly fine. So, take a breath, slow down. It's great. If you can adapt to it, it's really great. If you can't adapt, you probably should stay in the US.
Hmm. And I imagine you've seen some percentage of Americans return to the US. Maybe they were quote unquote sold the dream, or they just didn't adapt for whatever reason. What do you think is the difference maker between the people that enjoy it or stick it out versus people that go back?
That's interesting, and I've been struggling around that. I've been trying to find people to interview but they're hard to find because they've left. So it's not like there's a Facebook group of people who've left Mexico. There's Facebook groups for people who move into Mexico. So, but I've had some friends leave. Some of them were just, quite frankly, a little bored, and there were opportunities in the U.S. to unretire. She was a
Mm.
school teacher. He got his dream job. Um, uh, like rebuilding old hot rods. So they were like, we're going back to the U.S. to do this stuff to kind of speed up life a little bit, I guess. Other people, it's if you're just going to be frustrated with being in another culture, if you expect it to be the United States but cheaper, I think those are mainly the people who end up coming back. It's the people who are sold on moving there for the culture compared to moving there, trying to take your culture and just assuming, hey, the price is half, but
Hmm.
it's not going to work. If you're type A and you want things to work quickly, if you want to open your bank account online, that happens in the US and Mexico. Plan on spending 2 hours to open a bank account. So it's a little, yeah. If you're okay with that, you'll probably do well.
Yeah, you mentioned prices there a little bit, and maybe that's a good one to expand on. So, La Paz and Baja Peninsula is pretty expensive compared to the
Hmm.
rest of Mexico, one of the more expensive regions. And a
Hmm.
lot of people kind of complain that for a lot of things, it's basically US prices. Um, and I wanted to know, in your opinion, is that true? Like, how do you find the prices? Because you're doing 6 months, 6 months, so it's not like you're remembering prices from 5 years ago, pre-pandemic or something. Like you're actually going back and forth still. So how do you find the prices on things?
Well, I think we're always surprised either way. So when we come back to the north, we're like, oh my God, is it really this expensive? But then when we go back to the south, we're like, oh, it's a little more expensive than I remember. Part of it is inflation. Part of it over the last year, you've seen it. It's the dollar has been just beaten up by the peso. So the peso's gotten really strong. So the dollar is stretching uh, a lot less than it used to. So, but yeah, La Paz is more expensive. And I think, like as I mentioned, an hour with someone to, take care of your child is 100 pesos where we live. And I'm guessing a day is probably more like 500 versus where you are, it's 300. There's, there's not as many. I think the unemployment rate is lower in La Paz in the peninsula in general.
Mm.
Everything has to be shipped over from the mainland. So it's it's like living on an island. And so
Hmm.
things are definitely more expensive. I wish that was something we knew before we flew down and decided to buy a house, but it's still less expensive than the US. And I think it has to do like if you anything that's a service. So if you hire someone to build a really complicated rock wall for you, the rock will probably be expensive, but the person laying the rock will be really relatively cheap, especially compared to the US. So the more you can rely on services versus buying goods. If you want a really big TV,
Hmm.
it's going to be expensive. So some things are more expensive than the U.S. Fashionable clothing. I've I actually did a video about this where I tried to compare the prices of things and determine at what exchange rate it would be more expensive to live in Mexico. And like if you wanted Levi jeans are already more expensive in Mexico. If you wanted a
Hmm.
margarita, it's going to have to be, right now the peso is at 17 to 1, and the peso would have to be more at like 10 to 1 for the price of a margarita to be similar in the US and Mexico. But if
Right. Food will always be cheaper in Mexico.
yeah, and I couldn't even find an exchange rate where someone to take care of your kids or private school was more expensive in Mexico than the U.S. That it's just a great deal down there to get those kind of services or schooling, private schools, stuff like that. It's yeah, it's
And
so much.
and when you go to a restaurant, but actually, when you go to restaurants, do you say like, "Damn, this is almost U.S. prices," or is there still a big gap?
No, I think, we notice we go to much nicer restaurants in Mexico than we do in Portland because we know we can't afford the nice restaurants in Portland.
Hmm.
So what I think of is the nice restaurants down in Mexico with a real chef and they're like, really you're getting amazing food is probably similar to the price of kind of a, I don't want to say Applebee's, but just kind of like food in the US. So it's probably maybe 70% of the cost of US food at this point. Now, if you're in Cabo, I mean, you go down at the Cabo airport and a margarita is $20. And it's like, where is this coming from? And people are paying it. And I think I've heard the same thing in the resorts in Cabo because they know that Americans will pay that. So the further you get with away from other foreigners, the cheaper things will be.
Definitely makes sense. Yeah, I think that's kind of the golden rule we normally go by is that like American goods such as electronics,
Mm-hmm.
iPhones,
Yep.
um, maybe Zara or something, like all that stuff's gonna be a bit cheaper in the US. Not like crazy cheaper. It's not like Mexico has like insane tariffs or
Right.
something, but it might be like 10% more in
Mhm.
Mexico or something. But you can bring a lot of that stuff down.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. We bring a lot of things in every time we drive down, the things we would have trouble buying in Mexico.
hmm But once you can only buy so many TVs and stuff, and then
Yep.
once your day-to-day life is really more about services, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. It's a less, I mean, you can't get Amazon, same day Amazon down in Mexico the way, I don't know how much stuff I bought on Amazon since I got home, but I've been like, "Oh my God, I can get this today." So it's a more materialistic culture up here. Down in Mexico, we have a TV. We bought one at a secondhand store, but I think this last year we might have used it once, and that was just to stream like a game we were playing or something like that. So you don't end up watching TV very much when you've got the beach right there, or there's so many things, so many more things to do in Mexico, it seems, than watch TV. So a lot
hmm
of that electronics isn't as important.
So let me ask you about things to do. We only have about 5 more minutes here, and I got to run. But I think one underrated aspect beyond just maybe the cost of living for someone that's almost retired or retired is maybe they're going to have a much more active social life in Mexico. I'm kind of just guessing here,
Yep.
but I imagine when you're 55-ish in Portland, like things are pretty entrenched in terms of, social networks, and it's kind of probably kind of hard to make new friends, and
Hmm.
maybe there's not too much activities going on, or I don't
Yeah.
know. Whereas in Mexico, it's probably pretty easy to, get a group of like-minded people together and play cards or who knows
Yeah.
what.
Totally. I say that all the time on my channel that it is so much easier to make friends as an adult down in Mexico. It's kind of like you're back in college or something. It's just like you walk into a bar and if you see someone else who, doesn't look Mexican, you can probably sit next to them and ask them where they're from. And you'll strike up a conversation. Everything's great. Everyone just is very open that way. And also being in a minority like that, it's, people kind of connect more and hang out more. Yeah, we have my social network is so much stronger in Mexico than it is up in Portland, because in Portland it's constantly shrinking. It's hard to, as you mentioned, add new friends to your existing network. Someone moves away, it's like one less friend. There's down in Mexico, there's constantly people moving in and just like growing that. And there's so many dinner parties. It's something where you could, every night of the week, there's an activity. There's Spanish lessons, there's open mic night. It's like a playground for adults, I guess.
That's
And
cool.
that's even in La Paz. La Paz, I think someone told me it's 7,000 foreigners in La Paz out of like 350,000 people. So we're a pretty small piece. I'm guessing in Puerto Vallarta or Cabo, where there's so many more foreigners, there's even more opportunities. So yeah, as an adult, if you want to improve your social life, definitely go somewhere uh, where other people keep moving to, like Mexico or other places in Latin America that have
Mhm.
other expats, other foreigners living there.
Totally. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I mean, you get the sun shining.
Hmm.
You got this like college for adults vibe going on.
Well, sometimes it's
Um,
hard if you're working, if you're almost retired and everyone is out playing. The video I'm working on is over in La Ventana, and it's something where I had to do my interviews there. I think it was all before like 11 a.m. because at 11 a.m. that was the time that the wind was going to come up, and no one would commit to anything after 11 because they were all out on the water, kiteboarding, or all the different things they have. It was just, even with people who are working, they knew there was this part of the day that they had to go out and have fun and be active too.
Amazing. Well, we only got like 2 more minutes, so I guess we'll get to kind of wrapping up
Mhm.
and the classic let Brighton, give a little shout out message to the audience, anything you'd like to share. Obviously, in the show notes, we'll put links to your channel and everything. I wish we had time for more. What I want to do is maybe do like an almost retired roundtable and get some of the other
Yeah.
YouTubers and guys like this. We travel Tirement's one of our favorite guys, and some of the other ones. You could get you guys together for something like that. But anyway, so Ben, you want to take this time and let people know where they can find you and all that?
Yeah. So I think the easiest thing is just go to YouTube and almost retired in Mexico. We will pop up, and we release a video at least once a week, sometimes twice a week, usually on Sundays, sometimes on Wednesdays. And our goal is just to share what other people are doing so that you can get inspired to do it yourself and see what's possible.
Amazing. So again, my guest today is Brighton from almostretiredinmexico.com and a very popular YouTube channel as well. Brighton, I really enjoyed this conversation. This was really cool. This has been another episode of the My Latin Life podcast. Whether you're watching this on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, please be sure to subscribe because we drop 2 podcast episodes a week. You don't want to miss it. And with that, thanks to everyone for listening. Thanks again to Brighton for joining us.
Hasta luego.
This episode of the My Latin Life podcast is brought to you in part by BitRefill. BitRefill is the best way to spend your crypto in Latin America. Purchase gift cards or mobile refills from more than 3,500 brands in 186 countries instantly, safely, and privately. Visit bitrefill.com for more information. This episode of the My Latin Life podcast is brought to you in part by Job Stacking. Introducing Rolf Haltza's Paycheck Multiplication Layering Method, a revolutionary approach that redefines the traditional career path. This is Rolf's new Done With You program where he'll work with you to implement job stacking for yourself. With this method, Rolf contractually guarantees that you'll be able to double your income in 45 days. So, are you ready to step out of the shadows of job insecurity and step into a world of career abundance? Then just click the link in the description of this episode, book a call with Rolf, and start walking the path of unleashing your earning potential with job stacking.